Welcome to the tutorial. In our reading for this week, Nagel argues, making an analogy to epistemic skepticism, that the possibility that our lives are absurd, or what we might call value skepticism, should not provoke a crisis. Is he more right or wrong on this point? Provide an argument for your position. First, introducing, is Nagel's argument that absurdity should not provoke a crisis compelling? My answer to this question raises two possible criticisms of Nagel. And then those two are going to be presented below. Okay, but first I would say review Nagel's argument, review Nagel's points. So Nagel argues this definition of absurdity. What are his definitions? What are his arguments? These kind of things you should, I think, put here. And then now you're introducing your counter arguments, something like this. So one point that I'll go through in the tutorial, Nagel implicitly presents a dilemma between two options. Either there is a universal standard for values or there's no overriding standard to assess values. And then that dilemma can be shown to be false or dubious. The last point, lastly, Nagel's value skepticism may commit him to unacceptable implications. So I'll go through that example too in the tutorial. So yeah, we have the review paragraph. We have the challenge to his argument number one, challenge to his argument number two, in the last place there. Nagel's definition of skepticism. So I'm going to go through some quotes and definitions and stuff in the reading. And here are the quotes and stuff. The contingency and specificity are aims of pursuits. Okay, starting point of our skepticism. We see ourselves from the outside and all the contingency and specificity of our aims and pursuits become clear. Okay, so that is skepticism. So you're being skeptical because everything's contingent. So you're skeptical of values then. Absurdity, what about absurdity? Where does that come from? Philosophical judgment of absurdity. Now, when you insert your own idea into a quote to make it clearer, you put square brackets. That's why I put the square bracket of absurdity. The philosophical judgment of absurdity, that was said before, and it was implied that he was talking about the philosophical judgment of absurdity. Okay, anyway, hopefully that's clear to you. The philosophical judgment of absurdity contrasts, see, and I've added the square bracket to put the S. Okay, anyway, the philosophical judgment of absurdity contrasts the pretension of life with a larger context in which no standards can be discovered. So we have pretensions of life where we live with seriousness, we live seriously, we take life seriously. And then in the larger context, there is this no standard, there's no standard that can be discovered. Okay, that's absurd. And yes, all right. And Nagel's argument about epistemic skepticism. For example, I know that I'm looking at a piece of paper, although I have no adequate grounds to claim I know that I'm not dreaming. And if I'm dreaming, then I'm not looking at a piece of paper. So ultimately, ideas are uncertain because you could be dreaming, because there could be something going on, something fishy going on that makes everything unreal. That's always a possibility. So we have to be skeptical of knowledge, is his point. At a certain point, we are content to allow justifications of belief to come to an end. Okay, so we accept the uncertainty in our daily lives. So that's the distinction. There's ultimately, there's uncertainty, but in our daily lives, we accept this uncertainty. Okay, that's the contrast there with the knowledge. Nagel's first point is that no matter how confident we are with science as knowledge derived through extremely careful inductive methods, the whole universe might just be a dream, a hallucination, or other artifice that we cannot conceive. This first point is contrasted with the second point, which is that in our daily lives, we must admit laxer standards for claims to know something. Okay, that's a distinction. And now there's this value skepticism, which parallels the epistemic skepticism. We can ask not only why we should believe that the evidence of our senses at all, so that's we can have this epistemic or knowledge skepticism. Similarly, we can ask not only why we should take an aspirin, but why we should take the trouble over our own comfort at all. So ultimately, there's this pointlessness. We can be skeptical of our values, of all values. Why should we take trouble over our own comfort at all? And then that's contrasted with our daily lives where we accept pointlessness. We go on in the same way, even after we are convinced that the reasons have given out. We do not abandon our ordinary beliefs. We return to our familiar convictions with a certain irony and resignation. Okay. Sorry, I missed the quotation there. If there is no reason to believe that anything matters, then that doesn't matter either, and we can approach our absurd lives with irony instead of heroism, despair. So we should just accept the pointlessness with irony is okay. So Nagel's point. Nagel's first point is that all values are ultimately ungrounded and ungroundable in any concrete purpose. The first point is contrasted with the second, which is that in our daily lives, we must accept our ungroundedness. He proposes that our acceptance be ironic and not melancholic or heroic. Okay, so those are the main points. Irony, this is my favorite like bumper sticker kind of thing. Irony is the opposite of wrinkly. Okay, so arguments against Nagel, let's go through those. First, unacceptable implications. Is he kind of hiding? How is he kind of hiding from implications? Well, he says, we can ask not only why we should take aspirin, but why we should take trouble over our own comfort at all. Notice that he chose comfort as his example. He avoided controversial topics. Why not ask about why we should not commit murder? Like he just focused on comfort. Okay, if there is no reason for anything, then surely there's no reason to avoid doing harm. But he wants us to focus on comfort. He wants us. He's pushing our focus away from. There's a little sleight of hand going on here. Is what I'm trying to say. What's another sleight of hand? We can approach our absurd lives with irony instead of heroism or despair. Notice that he chose heroism or despair as his examples of other options. I understand that that's from Camus. That's why he's choosing them, but still at the same time, he's focusing on heroism, despair, irony, but he's just avoiding controversial topics. If nothing matters, why choose irony, heroism? Why choose despair? Why choose any of those things? Why not chaos and destruction? Why not be like the Joker? Some men just want to watch the world burn. That's from The Dark Knight, I think. One of the Christopher Nolan films. Okay. So what's the unacceptable implication? The first example that I would give is this kind of relativism or value skepticism is what we're saying, because we don't want to get into explaining relativism, and there's other implications. There's multiple types of relativism. So I would just go with value skepticism, but I'm just going to say relativism here for the sake of this example. So anyway, hopefully that wasn't confusing. The absurd is our true situation. There is no reason to believe that anything matters. Okay, and I've done ellipses here to like make him say this, but he essentially is saying this. I'm trying to clarify. I'm not trying to obscure what he's saying. I'm just trying to clarify. The absurd is our true situation. And I think that's valid that he says that. There is no reason, valid to say that he says that. There is no reason to believe that anything matters. Okay, if nothing matters, nothing matters. Genocide doesn't matter. Rape doesn't matter. Torture, exploitation, slavery, murder. Like that's all on the table here, not just other the like soft things that he's talking about. So his skepticism of values is, sometimes it's called moral relativism or vulgar relativism, and relativism says there's no point of view. It says no point of view about values is objectively best. Yeah, so it's an unacceptable implication if he's going this direction. I think that's implied in what he's saying. I think that's where he's going. Okay. So the unacceptable implication, Nagel would not want to endorse the view that doing harm to others is okay. And I mean, if you wanted to like look up don't do that, but if you could look up his other writings, and obviously he's not endorsing that doing harms to others is okay. So that's an unacceptable implication. If what he's saying is implying that doing harm to others is okay, he would not accept that. It's an unacceptable implication of his view. I think that that's an implication of his view. I think you can argue that that's an implication of his view, that doing harm to others is okay. So that's first unacceptable implication. Unacceptable implication number two, relativism relativizes itself. He says, if there's no reason to believe that anything matters, then that doesn't matter either. We can approach our lives with irony. On what grounds should we accept Nagel's value judgment about irony? Why value irony? Sure, he used an ironic contrast between the trivial reality and non-trivial pretensions to demonstrate the absurdity of life. Yeah, he used irony in his argument. He used irony, okay. But once it's established that no values matter, then there's no reason to value anything, including irony. Following his logic, we can value murder or chaos or whatever we like. It just doesn't matter. That's what I said before. But the unacceptable implication is if every view is as good as every other, then we have no reason, aside from personal preference, to accept Nagel's value judgment that we should approach life with irony. That's an unacceptable implication. So the unacceptable implication here, because Nagel obviously didn't set out to defeat his own argument. So if his argument defeats his own argument, that's an unacceptable implication. He would not accept that. Okay, so that's the second point that I think you could say. So false dilemma and counterexamples will go through. So there's this false dichotomy or dilemma. We could say either false dilemma or false dichotomy. Nagel presents a choice between only two options. He's implicitly, he only gives you two options. That's called a dichotomy or dilemma. Either it is the case that there is cosmic importance, an ultimate reason, something like this, or two, there is no defensible reason behind our values. Here's some quotes to offer examples: larger contexts in which no standards can be discovered. The reasons have given out. There's no reasons. The cosmic unimportance of our situation. In a universal perspective, there's no reason to believe that anything matters. So you can argue that there are more than two options. And Nagel then has presented a false dilemma between the two options when there's more than two options actually on the table. We can present counterexamples to show that Nagel's dilemma is dubious or false. To offer a counterexample, to show his dilemma is false, we can offer standards for values on top of the two standards that Nagel implicitly presented. Two other standards that I'll go through derive from contrasts between stories and contrast between perspectives. So I'll go through stories and I'll go through perspectives. Stories, example one. Standards for value can derive from comparing and contrasting stories. Many people contrast their lives and actions with the lives or stories or life stories of people who've lived and acted differently, like heroes, role models, things like this. Other people's stories provide us with external standards for our values. We seek to live up to the standards set by others. Second point, perspectives. A standard for value can derive from comparing perspectives. We rely on other people's perspectives to verify our assessment of a situation or value. If other people don't agree with our assessments, we second guess ourselves. When other people agree, we get the sense that we're on the right track. When other people don't agree, but their disagreement is inconsistent with their other views, then we regain trust in ourselves. So, for example, when colonial governments will not recognize millennia-old land claims, but they want their own centuries-old land claims to be recognized, that's an inconsistency. Counter-objection, largely tangential. Maybe Nagel would say that these standards belong in the category of pretensions. Maybe he might say that. Maybe he might say that the standards of comparing stories or comparing perspectives is just a pretension. It just belongs in that category. So there really are only two choices. So that would make this objection weak or erroneous. In a longer response, so in a different assignment, if we had a longer assignment, like write an essay about this, we would have to take this counterexample, counter objection in mind. Keep it in mind. But for this short response that we're doing this week, I wouldn't mention it. You could if you had a lot of room, but I don't think you will. Okay, and then the second tangent, just kind of joking around. It is ironic that Nagel presents his dilemma when defining absurdity using a contrast between pretensions and reality. Nagel's contrast, the philosophical judgment of absurdity, contrasts the pretensions of life with the larger context in which no standards can be discovered. The irony is that other contrasts undermine his argument. The double irony is that he thinks we can approach our lives with irony. Yet, a different irony defeats the argument he used to establish that we should approach life with irony. This is the irony inception. It's irony within irony. If you followed that, that's fine. If not, I'm just joking around. Okay. So, is Nagel's argument that absurdity should not provoke a crisis compelling? My answer to this question raises two possible criticisms. So you've introduced your thesis, everything. You've introduced the topic. So this is the topic. Boom. That's your thesis. Boom. Now you outline Nagel's argument. Nagel argues this. He defines things as this and this and that. And then Nagel implicitly presents a dilemma between two options. Either there's a universal standard or there is no universal standard. The dilemma could be shown to be false or dubious. And then lastly, you're saying Nagel's value skepticism may commit him to at least two unacceptable implications, and you can go through those. Hopefully this helps you out. Thanks for your time.